Soundcast.
This is a Village Soundcast Network original production.
Welcome to Lends Me Your Ears. I'm Stephen Cook, arts reporter for the Chronicle Herald here in Halifax.
I'm Carsten Knox, a blogger at Flaw in the Iris at halifaxbloggers.ca, and the movie guru at CTV Morning Live.
This is a movie podcast where we look at some current films and then examine some older titles that might be tangentially related, and hopefully you'll learn something about some films you might not have seen before.
On this week's show, with Ex Machina and Avengers Age of Ultron in mind, we're thinking about tech and how it's going to kill us all. So, Stephen, here we are again, and today we're talking about tech that destroys us. And this is a theme that, you know, has been around since pretty much the beginning of time. The first time someone came up with fire or a stick or something, it's like, oh, that's going to destroy society. And I mean, in literature and certainly in movies, going back to Metropolis or James Whale's Frankenstein, this is something that has been a common thread, you know. It's and obviously still with us. Yeah,
I mean, you even go back to Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, you know, and writing in the period of the Industrial Revolution, not knowing where this headlong speed into the future was going to take us. And of course, as film came along, it just became the perfect medium to capture that sense of unease and paranoia about what the future is going to bring, that it wasn't all going to be jetpacks and living in floating homes.
Yeah, right. Which in fact is now, I mean, dystopia is now this huge, I mean, we could do a podcast just on dystopia movies, but I think that just right now, this very minute, there are a couple of killer robot movies. There's certainly Avengers Age of Ultron, which is kind of dominating the cultural landscape in terms of movies right now. But there's we're talking about Ex Machina, which is coming a little bit under the radar, but is really worth considering, I think.
Yeah, it's not a super glossy film or a very effects-driven film, although obviously there are a lot of effects used to create the robot in the film. But it does capture that theme in a very personal. I mean, it could almost be a play. Really, it all takes place within one kind of compound as these two, you know, computer geniuses basically fight over the future of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and it's for those who don't know, it's directed by Alex Garland, who kind of made his name as a novelist first, and then he's worked with Danny Boyle a few times. He wrote the screenplay for 28 Days Later and Sunshine. This is his first chance to actually direct his own screenplay. And it stars Oscar Isaac as this kind of Mark Zuckerberg-ish character who has invented and is the CEO of Blue Book, which is the world's most popular search engine. He lives in this resort, which is in fact it's all shot at a hotel in rural Norway, I gather, out in the mountains. I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful spot. And through a contest in his company, he has come stay with him one of his employees, played by, we decide how we pronounce his name?
I think Doonal
Gleeson, Brendan Gleeson's son, who is also starring in everything at the moment. Doonal will be in the new Star Wars movie, along with Oscar Isaac, funny enough, the two of them. Anyway, so here they are, and what Oscar Isaac's character Nathan has done is created an artificial intelligence, a robot, a female robot. The gender specifics seem to identify as female, and he basically wants his subordinate there to run the Turing test on this, or a version of the Turing test on this robot, to try to figure out whether she passes as artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's like we're on to the next phase from the replicants in Blade Runner, that these are even more developed. And, you know, you can't help but think of the scene at the start of Blade Runner where they're testing Brian James as the actor. I can't remember the name of his
is it Leon?
Leon, yes, yeah. Leon. You know, as to whether or not he's a replicant, and asking him a series of fairly cryptic questions to see how he answers them. The questions here are a lot more direct, because obviously we're trying to question an artificial intelligence that's pretty close to human, and it wants a lot of things that humans want, but due to the nature of its, perhaps potential indestructibility and super intelligence, it might not be the greatest thing to unleash on the world. And
yes.
And so that's the kind of revelation that's very slowly pulled back. I mean, that's what I like about Alex's work in this film. It's a really a suspense film at heart. You know, we don't really know what these guys are dealing with or what's been created, and how far that Oscar Isaac's character has gone in seeking mechanical and in intellectual perfection in robot form, and you know, it really gets into your gut, you know, when you're kind of wondering, where is this going to go, where is this going to lead, you know, is it possible to have affection between robots and humans, or, you know, what's going on? And, you know, you don't want to give too much away, but you know, there are a few twists and turns along the way that made this really compelling movie for me.
Yeah, I really loved it too, and I think I'm predisposed to this particular genre. I love science fiction, and I love the question of what makes someone human, and you know, emotions and cognition and all those kinds of questions, which I think the middle section of this film really explores nicely. The ending, which I was still enjoying, but I feel like it became more of a thriller by the end, that some of the questions that it posed, it didn't entirely answer. But for me, nonetheless, I just felt like it was done so well, and it's so hypnotic. The score, the locations, the acting, everything kind of came together in a way that felt really, really compelling. You know, and I mean, there's also the question of, and it's brought up and addressed directly, not implicitly, but explicitly in the story, which is, you know, the objectivity of the creator, the Frankenstein. I mean, this is basically Bride of Frankenstein revisited,
exactly.
You know, and whether it was necessary to make Ava, the robot, female and sexualized. And of course, you know, if you think about it, it makes sense that a male egomaniac, who, you know, I think there's some argument that Nathan is an egomaniac, would go ahead and do this kind of thing. You know, robots for sex. It's not an untoward thought that men who created these machines would use them in this way. So then the question comes to us, an audience member, who's in control here? Who's really benefiting? Who's manipulating whom in terms of the characters? You know, is Nathan watching everything that happens? Is he really and has he created an AI? I mean, I guess that's primary, but also, is she manipulating Caleb? And and what's the relationship between the guys? There's all these questions. Every time there's a new scene, you kind of try to suss out what's actually going on here. And I love that about the film.
Yeah, there's kind of a strangers on a train relationship between Caleb and Nathan right off the bat, you know, whereas Nathan is he's a computer genius, but he's also kind of a party animal, and Caleb's like being very wary and you know, just trying to stick his toe in the water to see where he stands with this guy, and it doesn't like the signals he's getting back from him. And of course, we should pay credit to Alicia Vikander, who plays Ava, the main robot at hand here, because she's got a very tough job to play this you know, this android, whatever not cyborg, but certainly an artificial being that is, you know, where is she on the uncanny valley? Like, how close is
seriously.
she to the real thing? And you know, of course, we learn that Nathan has made her very close to the real thing, and you know, and she desires to get even closer.
And she wants freedom too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
And that's the sticky part of it. Is that you know, if we unleash her on the world, what comes next? You know,
Yes.
does she build an army of herself?
Yeah, there's a great moment where Nathan says it's probably going to be the next generation that's really going to be special, and I just found that to me was this great kind of like realization that he may not even know what he has.
It's true, and you know, and we get the feeling that maybe he didn't read Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, you know, when he was entering into this, because the laws of robotics, as we know them from that very famous book about human robot interaction, don't come into play the way they probably should have.
Yes.
Not in his. He's so cocksure, and so you know when he starts getting delusions of grandeur and misquoting Caleb and you know, when he says he's like a god.
Yes.
You know, then you know something is really going to go off the rails at some point in this film. So, you know, like you say, maybe the intellectual question of it isn't fully satisfied, but I think the film does a pretty good job of having its cake and eating it too, going from intellectual treatise to genre thriller, and doing it in a very gradual, kind of subtle way.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, and it's funny. It wouldn't be the first time filmmakers have ignored the source text, I, Robot, being part of it. I mean, that movie from 2004, I don't know why they even bothered making it, because it just seems so little relation to the actual book.
Very little.
Very little. But yeah, in this case, I think science fiction fans will really enjoy this. It does have a lot of thought put into it, and interesting, politics, interesting tech issues, and yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that made me think of was this recent thought. There was this recent question of what will destroy us. I think there was a poll, and a lot of people were asked, what will bring the human race to its end? And a lot of people said, climate change. The change in climate could destroy us all. But a lot of scientists, I think, including Stephen Hawking, said artificial intelligence might be the thing that brings us down. So that's maybe something to keep in mind while watching this film, and I think that's in the subtext here.
Yeah, I always wonder if Ava, being as intelligent as she is, if you programmed her with the laws of robotics, which include like robots shall not harm humans and all that, but if she's super intelligent, she could probably just reprogram herself. So maybe that's a moot point.
Yeah, maybe it is. And there is also another character in the film who plays a key part. And again, I'm trying to be cagey, so to offer any spoilers. But there are 4 real main characters in this space, and the 4th is also key to what happens in the end. And all of this is anyway. I think I'll stop. I'll stop because I'm going to dig myself a hole.
Yeah, we do want to leave some surprises.
Yes, yeah, for sure. But this Ex Machina is really worth seeing. It's opening here on May 8th, and people, I think actually it's kind of getting a rollout, so it might already be where you are listening to this. So by all means, go look for it. Ex Machina and Avengers Age of Ultron. These are movies that are revisiting what is a common genre trope happening, and has been happening for many, many years, that tech will eventually destroy us.
It's so true.
And I think, of course, there's been books about it. In movies, James Whale's Frankenstein, 1931, might be the first instant that I can think of, or if not Metropolis. I mean, going back that far, tech is, our tech, however you want to apply it, is something we're kind of afraid of. The thing we create will destroy us is something that keeps coming back.
Well, even going back, there's a silent version of Frankenstein that was made by Edison's company back in the 19-teens. So, going back to the Shelley novel, of course, the Mary Shelley novel, that man must not tamper in God's domain. But now we're tampering in this other domain that there is no God, and we're creating new ones out of chips and circuits, and it's the start of a long road to hell, I guess.
Yeah, well, exactly. And with the big Marvel movie coming May 1st, Avengers Age of Ultron is, which they've sort of retconned the comic story from, if anyone reads Marvel comics will know that Ultron is a robot, an indestructible robot that was created out of an experiment that is now in the movie. It's actually Tony Stark. In the comic books it was somebody else. But you can kind of see where they're taking that. It's a natural conclusion for what Stark's been doing in all the Iron Man movies and the Avengers movies is upgrading his technology, employing artificial intelligence, and hoping to protect the planet from the powerful forces arrayed against it. All of which is laudable intentions, but Ultron is kind of is the child that you really don't want to have.
Destroy all the humans,
especially when James Spader is voicing him.
Oh, so creepy.
So creepy. Yeah, but you can go back and see the way that tech has come to bite us on the ass. I like to think about that when I watch Godzilla movies. Obviously, the nuclear threat is the thing that frightens people, and that's the real parents of Godzilla. This radioactive lizard in 2014 was the most recent Godzilla movie, and it's still, even though it's not quite the nuclear thing is less of a prevalent theme in the new movies. It's there in the bedrock of the thing, and it's certainly a subtext.
Well, of course, in the new one, it's sort of interesting in that it's supposed to be kind of a reboot and a fresh slate as far as the giant thunder lizard Godzilla goes. But there's this indication that he's been around before, that this isn't the first time Godzilla has been encountered, and it leaves that kind of backstory kind of vague, and maybe they'll go back to it if they're in future installments. I think the movie was enough of a hit that we'll probably be seeing some sort of follow-up at some point. But there's always, the fear of the new is this thing that's been ongoing in mankind since somebody discovered fire, probably. Or came across a tree that had been struck by lightning. The creative powers that be will always find ways to exploit that, I think. I was thinking about this theme, and it occurred to me that some of the first iterations of television, people were talking about television. As soon as radio appeared on the scene, then people were thinking, well, what if it had pictures? Because the movies were coming along around the same time. And I think of like one of the first movies to reference television is like a Bela Lugosi thriller from the 30s called Murder by Television. Like all of a sudden, it's not even anybody's home yet, and it's already a threat. And then of course you think of how Orwell introduced television in 1984 as a kind of a thing that's watching you in your own house. That Big Brother has got a two-way mirror into your daily life through television, and and ultimately, it's relatively harmless, but somehow there was a threat implied there even before most people even knew what it was or had ever seen a television set.
Yeah, the idea of a glowing presence in your living room freaks people out, and I can understand that. I can understand it takes a while for people to get used to ideas of technology, and certainly if we build things that look like us or in some way seem like us, that seemingness is kind of creepy, the uncanny valley, and certainly that kind of stuff kind of gets under your skin in a way that you don't quite understand. I think about HAL 2000 or 9000, in 2001, A Space Odyssey, and how his even tones of his voice, which at one time seemed quite soothing, but also seemed terribly horrible once he had his little breakdown and started to do what he did. But that's he doesn't even need he can be a red glowing eye, and that can be terrifying. He doesn't even need to walk around. He doesn't need to be a killer robot. He can just be this intelligence with all this unbelievable capacity for good and evil. And of course, the evil part is what predominates, I think, in a lot of movies.
And the fact that he has control of the life support systems when you're out in deep space.
Yes, that's important.
Orbiting Jupiter. It's like you really don't want your computer to go insane at that particular point in time.
Yes. Yeah. You were mentioning this movie, speaking of artificial intelligent computers going insane, called Colossus: The Forbin Project. This isn't something that we just watched the trailer for, but this is not a movie I've seen. You know about it.
Yeah. It's kind of like a cheaper Earthbound version of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in fact in the trailer they make it was Universal, a different studio altogether, but they kind of try to ride the coattails of Kubrick's film, saying that it's got all the power and majesty of 2001 Space Odyssey or what have you, with it when it clearly does not have the same regard for the theme or Arthur C. Clarke's kind of vision, but it basically takes the kind of fail-safe Dr. Strangelove approach to, who's got control of nuclear weapons and so on, and, what would it take to go awry. But basically, the Forbin Project is a super intelligent computer. Obviously AI was a long way into the future at that point, but this computer basically just is able to control all the defense systems. It just amasses power somehow, and its creator is blithely oblivious to the threat until it's too late, I suppose. And
sounds a little bit like Whopper from War Games, the computer. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that's certainly probably an inspiration. War Games is a much better movie, I have to say. Uh-huh. But interesting that to see Atlantic-Canadian actor Gordon Pinsent as the president, fresh after his victory as the cop in Blackula. So, or actually, I think just before, now that I think about it, I think this film came first. And then he got the plum role in Blackula after Colossus, the Forbin Project. And Susan Clark, who I think is Canadian, anyway, as kind of the love interest, computer scientist who's kind of collaborating with Forbin, the scientist who invented this thing, as they try to get around the intelligent computer that seems to have eyes and ears everywhere, which oddly enough comes into play in the latest Fast and the Furious entry with the God's Eye computer kind of thrown in there as the MacGuffin of sorts. So, the idea of computers in the home was ways off, and yet there were films like this and Demon Seed with Julie Christie, another film from that period where, the idea of computers coming into our homes was something to be wary of and to really be scared of and try to prevent from happening because it would take over our lives. And it sort of has in a way, if you think about it. Now we've got little computers we carry in our pockets, but not in the way that these films kind of envision. Well,
no, it's funny that sort of the Jetsons version of the future very much by the early 70s has kind of been cast aside. There's not as much sort of optimism, even after the end of the Star Trek TV series. I mean, that was going on in syndication and people were loving it. But it's funny how so much of these, when it comes to tech, so much of it just is threatening to us that we're going to lose control of whatever it is we've done.
And yet, I have no robot maid. Where is my robot maid?
Yeah. Well, they promise us jetpacks is really what I always like to say.
That's true. Yeah. I guess the Roomba is as close as we're going to get to the robot maid, unfortunately.
So the king of the tech will destroy us theme, I think, has got to be Michael Crichton. This guy who had an amazing career as an author and as a screenwriter, and then actually as a director as well,
and a doctor.
Yeah, like the guy,
because he wasn't busy enough.
Yeah, he's kind of amazing actually, and not that all his movies were great or all his stories were great, but he had enough that really blew my mind, and he really milked this sort of Frankenstein man's hubris, humanity's hubris in what they create will be its destruction. Probably his most celebrated and well-known material is Jurassic Park, which Spielberg turned into 2 movies. I've actually never seen the third one.
Third one's a lot of fun, actually.
Okay,
because it decides it's just going to go for broke and be a big dumb popcorn movie.
Okay,
and so yeah, Crichton himself might not appeal or not approve, but
yes.
It's Joe Johnson, who made Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I think, is the director of that one, and it's. It's like, okay, we've gotten over the science theme. Let's just have a lot of dinosaurs running amok, and it's not as serious, but I think I enjoyed it more than the second one for some strange reason.
Well, I watched the second one again, and the one thing I liked most about it, I think, is my growing appreciation of the work of Jeff Goldblum, who in it is the skeptic, and I think that's important in these films, is to have someone who is just like, okay, this is a really bad idea, and I think a lot of people in the audience watching it are echoing those sentiments in their heart, and certainly, the special effects that made Jurassic Park such a success, at least part of that, the success of those films is how credible those beasts are. But yeah, it's about thinking that you can make a profit from it, I think, is at the core, and that's where people go wrong. And now, of course, we get a Jurassic Park coming out this summer, I think in June. Again, it just the story keeps being told. I saw the trailer for Jurassic Park, and I was like, man, there's nothing new about this except for Chris Pratt. Like, it's just the same story being told again. All the shots, everything about it. It feels. I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll be fun, but it's interesting. I think more interesting maybe is just that the themes of our fear of tech keep coming back. They don't go away.
And so do old story ideas. I think the Jurassic. I think it's Jurassic World. I think is the new one with Chris Pratt. Did
I say Jurassic World?
Park, but
oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Jurassic Park was the first one. Jurassic World is the new one. You're right. Yeah. But Michael Crichton has made a lot of other great stories of a similar theme. And going back to, I think Westworld was the one that I loved when I watched probably too young to have absorbed it properly, but I've seen it many times since, and it's the same kind of story. It's a future world, a park that people can go, and there are three parts of it. There's Westworld, Medieval World, and Roman World, populated by robots that look exactly like human beings, and people spend a certain amount of money, get taken to these places, and then live out their fantasies for a week in an old west town where they get to have gunfights with gunslingers, drink and party, and have sex with robots, basically, because that's what people really want to do.
Yeah, of course, as Ex Machina kind of goes back to.
Yes,
but the idea of the adult theme park in itself was kind of an odd idea, but the Disney World is kind of ripe for kind of a satiric look at it, but also like looking at the implications of like all these like super animatronic creations that were spawned by that part. Basically, animatronics and robotics that were invented, purely for amusement, not to help build cars or do heart surgery or whatever, but so you could have Abraham Lincoln stand up and make a speech. You feel like, what would it be like if Abraham Lincoln stood next to Millard Fillmore or whatever? I don't know if you've been to the Hall of the Presidents.
I haven't. No.
It's a good place to have a nap. Really, it's good on them for Liberty Square or Liberty, whatever, Freedomville or whatever that part of Disney World is. But to take that to the nth degree, I think was really, really clever on Crichton's part.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you ask yourself, well, would I enjoy this? What would I get out of it? But I think what's also interesting is that the robots, they malfunction. There's not any real reason for them starting to malfunction. Of course, they malfunction, but it's almost like a virus that takes place within their mechanisms, and they all sort of go wrong at the same time. Of course, now we live with built-in obsolescence in our electronics, but to see it in 1973, Yul Brynner playing the gunslinger that is unstoppable, kind of a Terminator, is really great. And I should say that if you haven't seen Westworld, the original, you should check it out before HBO remakes it, which they're doing with a series this year, which is being created by Jonathan Nolan, the co-writing brother of director Christopher Nolan, and executive produced by J.J. Abrams. And the HBO series will star Anthony Hopkins, Evan Rachel Wood, Jeffrey Wright, and as the sort of the mysterious gunslinger Ed Harris.
Oh, okay. I can totally see that.
Yeah, and they're going to make a series out of it, which should be pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to that in terms of remakes. That sounds actually pretty great. But the original is you should not miss it. And also you get to see Richard Benjamin running. So there's endless amounts of humor. I mean, he just is an interesting runner. He has an interesting style.
And there's also the sequel Future World, which is less successful.
Yeah, I didn't like it quite as much.
And I think, who's it, Peter Fonda, I think?
Yeah,
He's the
I think
star of that
that's
one,
right.
and much less charismatic than James Pee Wee Herman Brolin in Westworld. But yeah, that was an interesting thing. I saw Westworld before I ever went to a theme park, and it just made me really suspicious. I mean, I've been to Disney World a couple times, but just that whole idea of being entertained by fake humans and fake hippopotamuses, and obviously it's just now we got Chuck E. Cheese, which is the cheaper version of the Bear Jamboree. But it just seemed really odd to me to sit there and watch robots and kind of go through the motions and of entertaining us. So that film kind of puts a different spin on it. That I can't go to a theme park ever again without thinking of the potential for being gunned down.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm a big theme park guy, but I do enjoy these stories of these robots that go crazy. And I wanted to mention, although I don't want to touch on it, although it's not a great movie, another one of Crichton's movies. At least it's adapted from one of his books. called The Terminal Man from 1974. This one isn't as well known, but it's directed by Mike Hodges, who did Get Carter and later Flash Gordon. And it stars George Segal, and Donald Moffat and Richard Dysart, who joined, were part of The Thing in the early 80s as part of that cast of John Carpenter's film. And basically, The Terminal Man is about a guy who has a kind of epilepsy based on a brain injury, but instead of having a seizure, he experiences rage and gets very violent. So these scientists implant into his brain a computer the size of a postage stamp, which is supposed to manage his seizures by connecting them to the pleasure centers of his brain. What winds up happening is he finds violence makes him happy. So when he recovers, he goes on a rampage. It's as one does. Yeah, as you do. And it's I don't know that I'd recommend the film. It's very slow. The first act, it was about a 30-minute long surgery scene, and I don't know if it's supposed to be suspenseful, but it's really dull. But it's in terms of this theme, it very much is the same thing. It's like, oh, tech isn't going to save us at all. It's going to make us maniacs and serial killers.
I liked watching. I watched the trailer for this, and the announcer, when he said the term, the terminal man. The emphasis was not what I expected. It's like, he's the terminal man. The terminal man. And it was just like, it's very weird because like, oh yeah, he's terminal man. Oh, he's a terminal. He's got a computer in his head, so of course he's a terminal man as opposed to anyway. It's
it's
there's
also, lots of ways you could go with it.
It's all semantics, but but obviously he's also doomed. So
yes,
it kind of signals that right from the outset. But I'd be curious to see just George Segal just going psychotic on people.
Yeah, and they shave as they appear. I mean, best I can tell, it looks like they actually shaved his head, which is kind of unusual for a 70s leading man to see someone shave his head with a razor before he goes into surgery, which is kind of an interesting visual.
And he went on the Tonight Show with his banjo and did some. I'm just used to seeing him on talk shows. And
yeah, that's kind of he for a long time. That's what he did. Now he does sitcoms now these days, I think. But anyway, so 10 years after The Terminal Man, Crichton wrote and directed Runaway in 1984 with Tom Selleck as Jack Ramsey. Now this is around the time Tom Selleck looked like he was going to be a movie star as well as a TV star, but it never quite took. But he's a great presence in film and a generally likable guy. And here he plays a cop in a near future where his job is to track down malfunctioning robots, because in the near future we all have like helper robots. And the funny thing is the robots are like little boxes holding guns. Like they don't seem very compelling. In fact, most of them are pretty lame. He has his own sort of ridiculous housekeeping robot named Lois, who's basically like a box that has lights on it and moves in and out of rooms, and apparently is very capable of doing things, taking care of his son when he's not around, and doing all sorts of housekeeping chores. But
Roomba.
Yeah, but she basically doesn't seem to have any arms or anything. Like it's quite strange. The best thing probably about Runaway is Gene Simmons as the villain. And this is the first time he got
a lot more ink than Selleck did.
Yeah, I think so.
Turn.
I think so. And I mean, he's great. He's very brooding and intense. I don't know what kind of actor he is really, but he brings the villainous, the creep. And I know he's played a villain in a number of movies, but here he's a psychopathic genius who's invented a programming that can turn robots into killers, including he's figured out how to create heat-seeking bullets from robotic guns. So yeah, he's kind of a terrorist, and it's one of those the movies I think maybe one of the first times that terrorism is brought into the vernacular as a villainous kind of presence rather than some kind of national government or something to that effect.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not that big on Crichton as a director, but like I remember at the time this coming out, it just felt like his sort of version of Blade Runner. Tom Selleck. Like Tom Selleck. Tom Selleck was like the bargain bin version of Indiana Jones and High Road to China, and here he's kind of another Harrison Ford character, because that was kind of like they were trying to make him another Harrison Ford, and like you say, it never quite took. And I just have a vision of this film seeming incredibly dated now.
There's definitely some ways it is dated. I mean, I have a fondness for some of those dated aspects. I mean, there's some entertainment value here, certainly, and I would say mostly in Gene Simmons' presence. But I think the problem is mostly the robots. They're not scary. They're not compelling. They would have been much smarter to try to put humans in some kind of people in some kind of outfits to create, to make them more humanoid. But overall, I would say, that I'm actually quite fond of Crichton's visions of Doom by our own hand, sort of around the way. I do appreciate him, and though if you're going to choose one to see, and if you haven't seen one of the Jurassics, Westworld's the way to go.
Yeah, I'd stick with Westworld too. It's just it's I better cast. There are no annoying children in it. I actually remember watching Jurassic Park when they brought it back for IMAX, I think, or something like that, and it hadn't aged terribly well either in my mind. I didn't think that the computer effects, which were too bad. I know a lot was made about them at the time, and nothing ages faster than CGI. Like models and stuff like that still look great, but old CGI just it's amazing how quickly that stuff ages. But just those kids, oh my gosh! I don't remember them being that annoying the first time out, probably because I was just marveling at all the other stuff. But when that's kind of passé, you have to focus on the characters in the story, and that was just something that just kept bringing me down every time they showed up on screen.
Yeah, fair enough, and I sort of feel the same way. I just try to appreciate Goldblum and especially in that second movie.
Oh yeah, he's the highlight for sure.
When he's like, that's how it always starts, but later is running and screaming. So we cannot continue discussing, the way tech will destroy us without mentioning the Terminator movies.
Speaking of killer robots.
Killer robots, yeah. I mean, frankly, the Terminator, James Cameron's creation, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the best role he's ever going to have. And I say that as a huge Conan fan. And then Terminator 2, Judgment Day, also amazing. And then they kind of start to drop off. Now, we've got a Terminator on the horizon. Terminator Genesis, directed by Alan Taylor, who did the second Thor movie and is a veteran of Game of Thrones. And I'm okay with more Terminator movies. I would be happy if they left the franchise alone, but it's I love the theme. I love the music. I'm okay with Schwarzenegger. I'm even okay with an aging Terminator, which looks like what we're going to get this time out.
Yeah, it's Salvation was kind of a letdown. It was grim without I mean, there's so much humor in the first two, and the third one tries to do it, but doesn't. Rise of the Machines tries to approximate some of that, but it somehow falls flat. And so I don't think the concept is dead. I think it's as long as they remember that just that right mix of elements of having that kind of rebellious spirit, but also some of the humor and you can and some grimness. Obviously, you think of Judgment Day, they blew up the world in a dream sequence. So, but it's all about the balance of all the different elements. And I think Salvation went too far into the just grim apocalyptic wasteland, and without remembering that we got to have human characters too. It's not just all about the robots.
Well, Christian Bale is not. He doesn't have a funny bone. That guy, I don't think. You cast him in your movie. It's hard to get light.
Yeah, well, I think American Hustle, maybe we saw a little bit of that.
A little. I wasn't that much of a fan, I gotta say.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, just at least for something different out of him. And but yeah, it'd be nice. It would be nice if he could lighten up a little bit.
I should say, speaking of killer robot movies, one of the most delightful ones, if you want to say delightful, is The Iron Giant, Brad Bird's wonderful animation from 1999, which, of course, uses the wonderful voice talents of one of the biggest stars in the world right now, Vin Diesel, who most people know from those car movies, but also he did the voice of Groot, and he did the voice of this giant robot which arrives in a small town in the 1950s, I think, and makes friends with a little boy, and his programming has been adjusted, and he kind of has this existential dilemma, this robot. Is he a weapon or is he a hero? And he really wants to be a hero. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous story. But it's very much this theme of this thing that was actually made to be a force of destruction but doesn't have to be. It's sort of walking the line between will our tech destroy us or not.
Yeah, Brad Bird can do no wrong, really. He's got so much imagination, so many ideas, and I haven't watched Iron Giant in a long, long time, but I just remember being really delighted by this film and how it had that nice kind of nostalgic glow about it, but also, looking forward, kind of playing on the Cold War paranoia in a way that I don't think an animated feature film had done before, aside from When the Wind Blows, where it's post Cold War and into the post nuclear war era. But Iron Giant was something different. I think it asked a lot of its audience, especially young viewers, asking them to think about history and about kind of the classic science fiction and putting a new spin on it and looking at what these creations could do. Like they had this hopeful attitude towards technology but with a retro spin. It's like so much stuff about this, and I really want to revisit this at some point.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It doesn't. It's kind of one of the timeless stories that I've never gotten tired. I've seen it 3 or 4 times, and I always get a little choked up at the end. It's funny that there's room for those kinds of stories. I think it's probably the reason why I so enjoy all the various Star Treks, though a little less so the J.J. Abrams, I got to admit. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice when a science fiction film shows up that has a vision of the future that is positive or optimistic. It's kind of a breath of fresh air because there are so many examples of the things we're talking about, which is like the future looks pretty damn grim for most people. And our machines, most of them are going to kill us like they do in Maximum Overdrive. How's that for a segue?
That's an awesome segue.
Yeah,
for reasons unknown to, or maybe I think in the movie maybe they did come up with a reason why.
Well, there was a comet.
That's it.
There was a comet
as
that was and it was flying around the Earth for this certain amount of time. The movie is very specific about how many days it was flying around, and as a result, all this stuff, this tech goes haywire. And I mean, I can understand sun flares, sunspots, and radiation doing strange things to electronics. But when the lawnmower is threatening, then you're in trouble. And actually, I know that director Stephen King, the only film that he has directed in his career, the novelist has directed, he called it like a moron movie after the fact. He also apparently admitted that he was doing a lot of coke at the time, and so he was just trying to do his best, and he really wasn't paying a lot of attention. But I can see the appeal of this thing. It's very light. There's a lot of humor in it.
Well, the short story it's based on is just a short story, I think, just called Trucks.
Trucks, yeah.
And it's in the Night Shift anthology, which is my favorite collection of his short stories. There's some amazing stuff in there, and including one I think called The Stuff or something like that. But and I find short stories often make for better movies than novels.
Absolutely.
Because, if it's a concentrated period of time and you don't have to worry about cutting stuff out because it's all there.
Sure.
There was no explanation in the short story as to why. It was just happening. I was instantly reminded of a TV movie I saw when I was a kid called Killdozer, about a bulldozer that just, I think there was an accident and it's like somebody's brain got electrified somewhere near the bulldozer and it gave it intelligence. It was evil intelligence and it just starts killing people. But but I saw that as a kid and I was fairly impressionable at that time, and that haunted my dream. So along comes this story. So it actually pulled on something that I already had in my imagination, but here it just takes it way over the top.
Oh, it is. It's totally over the top. Emilio Estevez. I mean, these characters basically get stuck in a truck stop when all the trucks go crazy around them and start circling the building. And it's it's very silly stuff, but there's a lot of fun too. And I know it's considered pretty much trash, but there is I wouldn't entirely write it off. And I mean, aside from King, there's also AC/DC all over the soundtrack.
They did all the songs.
All the songs. So if you're an AC/DC fan, there's a lot to recommend. Now, I feel like we could mention this here, or we could have mentioned it in our last podcast, which was about cars. But there have been like killer car movies. Well, The Car from the 70s, and then another Stephen King movie, Christine, which is about a haunted car that is scary, and these vehicular monsters are out there in movies, and some of them are worth checking in on.
The Car is a lot of fun, by the way.
Yes.
I have it on Blu-ray.
Yeah, James Brolin again.
Again, with that fabulous beard. I can't recommend that one enough. It's, again, another, like Killdozer, saw it at a young age, in the TV, edited for TV version. But, it just made you really suspicious of anything mechanized and kind of evil.
Yeah, and that strange horn off in the distance.
Oh, yeah.
This crazy repeated horn sound. And it will also, not unlike those Fast and Furious movies, the car, it ignores the laws of physics. There are times when it just leaps off the road and into houses.
Yeah,
and
right
things.
through a building.
Yeah, right through a building, and kills a lot of people, and there's a lot of creepiness going on there.
Yeah, it's basically, what if we could have Jaws on land? And oddly enough, they did a film, Prophecy, about a giant bear with Richard Dysart from The Terminal Man. Oddly enough, was in that one. So
yeah, no, that's totally worth seeing, and it's funny because that would be an entire other podcast.
Oh yeah, nature will kill us.
Yeah, nature.
We'll get to that one eventually.
But the tech is part of that too, because I think it's like radioactive waste, nuclear waste, or something in that case. But certainly, it's our interaction with the world that is going to come back to be our our downfall.
Yeah, we're basically doomed.
Yeah, basically doomed.
Well, we were briefly talking about technology clashing with nature, and again, that turns around to bite us on the hinder. And the Planet of the Apes series is probably a good example of that, where it's sci-fi, and with the current reboot of the whole Planet of the Apes series, it's even more implicit in the genetic fiddling about with chimps and monkeys and those that are similar to us but a little bit different.
And they hate us for it, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
They become super intelligent beings with their own community.
They don't want to work with us.
But they want to destroy us, basically. Yeah.
It's like, you had your turn.
That's right.
It's our time now.
Yeah.
And, that made a real big impression. It's great to see these as a kid, these films, because they do leave a big impression, and it makes you wonder, about the evolutionary chain and why, in particular, that we're supposedly at the top of it.
For sure.
Whether or not we really are.
The first movie from '68 is a classic in that it shows this society of apes on what we first believe is a faraway planet somewhere far outside of our own experience. Of course, as we learn, and this is one of those perfect moments of like, if you haven't seen this yet, then what the hell are you doing listening to this show? Because we are, the fact of it,
if you've come this far, you've
probably seen one of them. But clearly, the Planet of the Apes is actually Earth, as it's revealed later. And then the presumption, and then there were a bunch of sequels of movies through the 70s, where we learned more and more about how we played a role in the rise of the Planet of the Apes, and certainly there was a nuclear element. I mean, we blew ourselves up, and then
it was only the second installment. They blew up the Earth.
Yes,
you maniacs.
But in the new films, it becomes much more and more explicit as it goes along, and certainly messing with nature using our technology to mess with genes and encoding DNA and all that kind of thing is certainly part of that sort of tech hubris that playing God, which is behind all of these stories, in movies like Gattaca, the future societies are envisioned in this dystopic way, and we certainly fear the possibility that we'll all be kind of genetically perfect or in line with one another. Diversity becomes more and more important, and I think that's important to consider as well.
Yeah, I keep waiting for someone to get around to a decent version of Huxley's Brave New World, which kind of ventures into that idea as well. That's an idea that I think there was a very bad miniseries made of that in the 80s. I think that's a story that's probably ripe for retelling, as man strives to reach some sort of new level of perfection, and then of course it just all goes horribly wrong. So Gattaca's not a film. I haven't seen that since it came out, but I remember being really struck by its kind of stark clinical vision of what we're heading for or possibly heading for. I don't think things are going to be too clinical. Things seem to be going more in the direction of messy.
Yes,
than
you're right.
Kind of a sparse 2001 style future. I think it's the Mad Max is looking more and more realistic all the time. But
yes.
Certainly that whole tampering in God's domain is kind of speeding us along that path, it seems like. And we started with Frankenstein, and you've mentioned a film that kind of takes that in a whole new level. And then we're the 2009 film Splice, which gets goes with that idea of a more updated, modern, genetic, scientific version of Frankenstein that is at times pretty terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great monster movie, and I think it's a nice one to end off on. This is directed by Vincenzo Natali, a Canadian director who did Cube, very low budget but very successful science fiction picture from some years ago. And Splice was a follow-up starring Adrian Brody and Sarah Polley as genetic scientists who happen to be a couple, and they are working on animal experiments, but they decide to introduce a little bit of human DNA into these experiments, and they basically create a child named Dren, who is very much a modern Frankenstein. She's a fast-growing creature who has some real gifts, and as the story goes on, it becomes weirder and more discomfiting and more unpleasant as she grows up and she starts to have very powerful effects on the lives of her creators, and that's when it becomes the things about her that are him. It's kind of a gender-free zone there. It's kind of, I don't want to spoil it because some of those surprises are part of the pleasure, if you want to call it that.
Oh
in
yeah,
the film.
big time.
Yeah.
As the sort of animal hormones mix with human hormones in a big way. I hear stories about how raccoons, once they hit puberty, the people try to have them as pets, but then they just go wacky. They go nuts. They just change on a dime, and that's kind of what happens here to a certain regard. And I just realized that Dren spelled backwards is nerd.
Yeah.
Jeepers.
That was part of the deal. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is a film. I mean, the great thing about Splice is like when it wants to be terrifying and scary and really heavy on the edge of your seat, it does a good job at doing that. But it also has that sense of humor that I feel goes awry so often. The fact that the Adrian Brody's character is Clive, after Colin Clive, who played Dr. Frankenstein in the James Whale film, and of course Sarah Polley's name is Elsa, after Elsa Lancaster, who was the bride of Frankenstein in the sequel. So they're kind of winking at us a little bit. They're letting us know that they're wearing it on their sleeve a little bit, and but they get that out of the way pretty quickly. Like it's just they know we know going in it's an homage, and then they treat it respectfully and then really really go for the gusto with taking their Frankenstein creation to a whole new level, whole
modern level that will I think will make most people pretty damn uncomfortable. I loved the film, and I also really loved the aspects of it. This is a shot in Toronto film. It's a Canadian movie, and it's quite indebted to the sort of body horror of Cronenberg and just the look and feel of it too. Some of Cronenberg's best films have a lot of this stuff going on. I want to talk about a very visceral connection with tech. He is one of those guys who definitely has films in that department too. But yeah, Splice is a great modern Frankenstein movie, and and they just keep making them, keep doing great Frankenstein movies, and we just find new ways to tell this story, and it makes me pretty happy. I don't know.
Just don't see Frankenstein. That is the flip side. That is the bad Frankenstein movie. Stay far, far away. That's our show. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. You can contact us on Twitter at LensMeYourEars, all one word, or search for Lends Me Your Ears on Facebook.
We're on Stitcher, and you can rate and review us on iTunes, and if you do, we'll give you a shout-out in a future episode. Our email is lensmeyourEarsPodcast@gmail.com. I'm Carsten Knox, and my Twitter is at Carsten Knox.
And I'm Stephen Cook, and my Twitter is at @CH_SCOOKE.
Lends Me Your Ears is hosted by Stephen Cook and Carsten Knox and is produced in Halifax, Nova Scotia at Village Sound for the Village Soundcast Network. Lends Me Your Ears is engineered by Luke Badio and is produced by Dave Anderson and Jason Michael McIsaac. All music courtesy of Gypsophilia. Check out all of their amazing music, tour dates, and so much more at gypsophilia.org. Discover more great shows on the Village Soundcast Network by going to villagesoundcast.com. We can also be found on Twitter at VSoundcast and on Facebook by searching the Village Soundcast Network. Rate and review us on iTunes and you'll get a shout-out on an upcoming show. Send feedback to lensmeyourearspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
This was a Village Soundcast Network original production.